Declaro aberta a primeira sessão de trabalho da 10ª Cúpula de Presidentes dos Parlamentos do G20,
work session of Presidents of the Parliaments of G20 with the topic, the contribution of Parliament to the fight against hunger, poverty, and inequality.
Convido a compor a
I'd like
mesa
to invite
juntamente com esta presidência
to
a
form
senhora
the
presidente da
table
União
the
Interparlamentar,
President of the
UIP,
Interparliamentary Union,
Tulia Exxon.
Tulia Exxon.
Excelentíssimos senhores
Your
presidentes de
Excellencies,
parlamentos,
President of Parliaments and representatives present here.
a fome no mundo
Hunger
é
in the
problema
world
crítico
is a
e
critical
crescente.
and growing
Em
problem.
2023,
In
a Organização
2023,
das Nações Unidas
the
para a
United
Alimentação
Nations
e
for Food and
Agricultura
Agriculture
apontou
pointed
que
out
uma
that
em cada 5
one in each
pessoas
5
em
persons
59
in
países
59 countries
vive em
live
insegurança
in
alimentar,
food insecurity,
totalizando
totalizing
281 milhões de
281 million
pessoas
people
em risco.
at risk.
A taxa de insegurança alimentar
The
aguda
food
passou de
insecurity rate, acute food
14%
insecurity
em
rate,
2018
went from 14% in 2018 to 21.5% in this group of countries,
destacando o desafio de cumprir a meta
showing the
da
challenge to
Organização
fulfill
das Nações
the
Unidas
target of
de
the
erradicar a
United
fome
Nations to eradicate hunger
até 2030.
by 2030.
Globalmente, mais
Globally,
de 9% da
more than
população está
9% of
subnutrida
population is
e
under
esse número continua a
nutrition,
aumentar.
and this number is rising.
Conflitos,
Conflicts,
crises econômicas,
economical crisis,
mudanças climáticas
climate change,
extremas
extreme climate
e a falta
change,
de políticas
and the lack
eficazes
of effective
são
policies
fatores que
are
intensificam
factors that
essa
intensify
realidade.
this reality.
Diante desse cenário
Facing this
alarmante,
alarming
o
scenario,
papel dos parlamentos
the role of
é
parliaments
essencial
is
para
key
desenvolver
to
soluções
develop
e promover a
solutions
justiça
and
social
promote
e
social
econômica.
and economic justice.
Nesta sessão de trabalho,
In this work session,
discutiremos
we will
como
discuss
contribuir
how to
para
contribute
políticas inclusivas
to inclusive
que
policies
fortaleçam
that
a
strengthen
segurança alimentar,
food
a
security
proteção social,
and also
a
social
redução de
security,
desigualdades
social
e da
protection,
pobreza,
the reduction of
o
inequality and
auxílio
poverty,
humanitário e a
humanitarian
sustentabilidade
aid,
na
and
produção
sustainability
de
in the
alimentos.
production of food.
O compromisso e a
The
cooperação entre
commitment and
nações
cooperation
são
among nations
fundamentais para construir futuro sem fome,
are
sem
key to
pobreza
build a
e
future
sem
without
desigualdades
hunger,
sociais
poverty,
extremas,
and
com
extreme
marcos
social
jurídicos
inequality,
que
with legal
efetivamente
frameworks that
enfrentem esses
can
desafios.
effectively face these challenges.
Para organizar os trabalhos e
To
peço a atenção de
organize
todos
our
e
work here, and I ask
esclareço
for
que
your
cada
attention,
orador poderá usar da
I'd like to say
palavra
that
nas
each
tribunas
speaker
por 5
will
minutos,
use the word
a fim de garantir o cumprimento de
in the
nossa
pulpit
agenda de
for 5
eventos
minutes
e
to
a
fulfill our
isonomia entre os
agenda of events and
representantes.
isonomy
O
among
sistema
representatives.
de áudio do
The
plenário
audio
está
system in the
programado
plenary
para
is
soar o
programmed
toque da
to
campainha
ring
30
a bell
segundos
30
antes do
seconds
fim do
before
tempo do
the
orador,
end of the time of the
como
speaker,
alerta para que
as a
encaminhe a
warning
conclusão de seu
for he
discurso,
or she to
sendo
finish
desligados os
their talk,
microfones após
and the
5
microphone will be
minutos de
turned
uso da
off
palavra.
after 5 minutes of the use of the word.
Solicito também
I
que todos
also would like
falem de forma
to
pausada
request
para
you
que a tradução
to
simultânea
speak slowly
possa
so that the
refletir
simultaneous
os
interpretation can
pronunciamentos
reflect
com a máxima
your
precisão.
words with
Agradeço
maximum
a
precision.
compreensão
I would like
e
to
a
thank you
cooperação
for
de todos
your
com essas
understanding
regras
and
necessárias
your cooperation for
para
these
o
necessary
bom
rules
andamento
for
da sessão.
the good
Concedo a palavra à senhora
for a good
Maharani,
session.
presidente do
We'd like to
Parlamento
start
da
with Ms.
Indonésia.
Puan Maharani for the Indonesian Parliament for her address.
President of the P20 Speaker Summit, speakers and leaders of the parliaments of the G20 member states and guest countries. First of all, I would like to convey my appreciation to the President of the Chamber of Deputies and the President of the Federal State of Brazil for hosting the P20 Speaker Summit 2024 in dynamic city of Brasilia, and for the hospitality extended to me and my delegation. Excellencies, various global crises have disrupted lives of the people around the world. The COVID-19 pandemic, economic instability, climate change, and ongoing wars and conflicts have increased food and energy insecurity. Nearly 700 million people, which is equal to 8.5% of the global population in the world, also still live in extreme poverty. We live in the age of rising geopolitical tension, wars, and conflict, perhaps the most dangerous time since the Second World War. In short, the world is facing a perfect storm. Rising geopolitical tension and major power rivalries have diverted the world attention from the poor. The global military spending reached 2.4 trillion in 2023 US dollar. It is equal to 2.3% of the global GDP. At the same period in 2023, official development assistance amounted to 223.7 billion US dollar, or less than 10% of the global military spending. While we know that international community has difficulty to allocate budget for climate finance and build schools, health facilities, and other development needs for developing countries. What happened in the world can allocate 50% of the global military spending, or around 1.2 trillion US dollar every year until 2030, to help the poor. This would bring big impact, and we will have a different world. A world free of poverty and a world free of hunger could be achieved by 2030. As we gather here today, parliaments can renew our political commitment to sharpen budget allocation in every country, create a more peaceful and prosperous world for all, big and small countries. We are, all political leaders in our countries, can make a difference. We can influence government in our respective countries, including influencing to solve our dispute and differences by peaceful means. As the world leading economies, the G20 should be able to take bold action, lead by example to rectify the world focus and priority. Multiply crises in the world have demanded our attention at the same time. Therefore, it is up to us if we want to make peace, so we can alleviate poverty, fight against hunger, and resolve inequality. We should end war in Gaza, Ukraine, and beyond. We should implement immediate ceasefire in Gaza and provide humanitarian assistance. We should work to realize two-state solution. War and conflict are not unavoidable. It is a matter of political decision, whether we want to wage war or make peace. It is also a political decision whether we allocate more budget to buy weapons or to build more schools and hospitals in developing countries. Likewise, we, Parliament of G20 member states, must address the root cause of the intertwined issues of poverty, hunger, and inequality. At this time, the world has all resources. We have the funding and we have the technology to end poverty and leave no one behind, but we may not have enough commitment. Therefore, let us work together to end war and conflict so that we can create peace and end poverty everywhere and for everyone. I thank you.
Agradeço à senhora presidente do Parlamento da Indonésia.
Thank you from Indonesia. Now I'd like to hand over Numan Kutucu, President of the Turkish Parliament, for his pronunciation.
Saygıdeğer meslektaşlarım,
distinguished colleagues, distinguished representatives of parliaments, and esteemed members of the international community. So the title of this meeting is Parliaments for a Just World and a Sustainable Planet. So this is a very carefully thought selection, and I'm very glad that this is the theme that we have today. And I would like to thank everyone, one by one, who have contributed in the organization of this meeting. Today, we are gathered here today, and the reason is to discuss important decisions about future and also to lay the foundations of a more fair order. In our culture, we consider common good as well-known, and we exaltate goodness from to the universal level. And this is a goal, and this is a joint responsibility for the entire humanity. So we consider this summit as an opportunity, and it carries a very deep meaning with the prerequisite that all the developments we see in the world are major crises. So we have to see our meeting as a platform to take important steps to how to build a future. Today, the world is grappling with various challenges caused by inequality, like poverty and hunger. Right now, in our countries and in the global scale, we are faced with major challenges and tests. And this makes it imperative for us, the entire humanity, to act in joint responsibility. So we have three main concepts. The first one is justice, the second one is welfare, and the third one is solidarity when it comes to hunger and poverty. So justice is the foundation of establishing peace. So we need to have a proper perspective to fight all kinds of inequality. So there are imbalances caused by those who act as if they own the world, and this has pushed millions of people under the hunger limit. But we are not owners of this world, but we are merely the trustees, and we have to act with a sense of justice and with a major responsibility. This is how we should be taking our steps. Those who act with a perspective, with a focus that they are only guardians of the world, only then they can come up with sustainable solutions and ensure lasting peace. Today, we are living in a world where even UN resolutions are not executed. This lack of responsibility also indicates the weakness in global governance. Unless we have a just foundation, we cannot have lasting peace. And unless we have peace, none of the countries in the world cannot have peace in their world. As we all know, instability does not only happen in areas with conflict, it impacts other areas as well. From Gaza to Ukraine, to Russia, to Ethiopia, to Sudan, to Yemen, in many areas in the world, conflict deprives people of even of their fundamental rights. These crises are not only regional issues, but they are issues all around the world. Today, any injustice in the world hurts the conscience of every people. So one example, failure to execute international law and UN resolutions have turned into an ongoing state terrorism in Gaza, in territories of Palestine and in Lebanon, and killed women and children and left them in the hands of hunger and diseases. So Israeli government can declare UN Secretary General His Excellency Guterres as persona non grata, and they attack UNIFIL and UNRWA personnel, and this shows the clear need that we should be questioning the function of UN. So South Africa offers great support to the case of Palestine, and we should be reminded of the practices that South Africa was subjected to by the UN back in the dark apartheid regions. So I would like to clearly say that it is now time to discuss Israel's UN membership suspension. Countries who gather under the roof of UN, they gather around the common good. I'm sorry, the mic is off. So we have to go around common good. Thank you very much.
Ao senhor presidente do Parlamento da Turquia, concedo a palavra ao senhor Kian Pin Sia, presidente do Parlamento de Singapura, para o seu pronunciamento.
President of the Parliament of Singapore for his address.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I extend my heartfelt appreciation to the President of the Brazil Federal Senate, Mr. Rodrigo Pacheco, and the President of the Chamber of Deputies, Mr. Arthur Lira, and the Parliament of Brazil for their warm hospitality and the excellent arrangements at this summit. As we convene today, we face stark realities. Hunger, poverty, and inequality are intersecting challenges that must be addressed together to ensure sustainable food security for all. It is projected that by 2030, over 600 million people worldwide will still face hunger, and 575 million will continue to live in extreme poverty. Therefore, this crisis demands our immediate attention and action, aligning closely with the G20's focus on sustainable development and inclusive growth. Singapore welcomes the Brazilian presidency's strong focus on reducing global hunger and poverty, including the initiative of a global alliance against hunger and poverty. And we look forward to working closely with Brazil and the G20 on these crucial efforts. Parliaments play a vital role in this fight. We are the voices of our people, and we hold the mandate to create sound policies that shape supply chains, ensure proper allocation of resources to social programs, and grant equitable access to nutrition for all citizens. Today, I'd like to focus on the issue of supply chains. Food security is an existential concern for small countries like Singapore, which imports more than 90% of the food we consume. Global food security has been significantly impacted by geopolitical developments and climate change. Against this backdrop, Singapore deeply values our excellent partnership with Brazil in food security. We import significant agriculture and food products from Brazil, and there are also technical assistance partners in promoting food security and knowledge sharing. 2 months ago, on 15 September, we conducted the inaugural course under the Singapore-Brazil Third Country Training Program on food safety. It was jointly conducted by the Singapore Food Agency, the Brazilian Health Regulatory Agency, and the Brazilian Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock for officials from ASEAN state members and Timor-Leste. This collaboration exemplifies the potential for international cooperation in addressing food security challenges. Looking ahead, there is scope for Singapore and Brazil to work together to strengthen food supply chain resilience in Asia, including Southeast Asia. Given Singapore's strong logistics and distribution network in the region, we are well positioned to serve as a regional hub for transshipment and re-exporting of Brazilian meat, thereby strengthening the overall supply chain resilience. At home, Singapore is committed to building an inclusive and caring society where all citizens have equal opportunities to thrive and contribute. Our social compact aims for low-income families to achieve stability, self-reliance, and social mobility, what we call the 3S framework. This compact is anchored on individual and family responsibility, supported by the community and the government. Our Parliament has played a crucial role in shaping a multi-layered support system that uplifts everyone, including especially the vulnerable. Broad-based subsidies benefit all Singaporeans, while targeted assistance focuses on lower income and vulnerable groups. From education to healthcare to social assistance, we have woven a safety net that leaves no one behind. For instance, our Kids Start program supports low-income families with children up to 6 years old, laying the foundation for a strong start in life. Meanwhile, our progressive wage model uplifts low-income workers through skills upgrading and improved productivity. Over the years, our approach has shifted beyond episodic assistance to longer-term empowerment. Our efforts have yielded positive results, evident in our economic growth, and has translated into real gains for our people. We have also seen high levels of intergeneration income mobility. A study by our Ministry of Finance found that among children born from 1985 to 89 to parents who were at the bottom,
Agradeço ao presidente do Parlamento de Singapura. Próximo orador é o senhor
Salomon Nguema, President from the Lower House from the Equatorial Guinea.
Señor Presidente, en nombre y representación del Parlamento de la República de Guinea Ecuatorial, ruego me sea permitido, en primer lugar,
G20 in first place, to thank the organizer for the invite formulated for our participation in this summit to show our reflection around the topic of fight against hunger, poverty, and global inequality. These days, it's not questionable what many citizens and families face in today's world, characterized by situations of malnutrition and social exclusion that are just arising with the insufficiencies of institutional action, but also it's extended due to the armed conflicts, the economic crisis, extreme climate events, and other causes that are happening in many places in our planet. This situation of global concern is it's enough to believe in all the reports issued by the United Nations. Those that shows that today the number of people that are fight against the poverty have increased, not only due to the climate change, but also by the wars that are in place in many latitudes of our planet. The same way, the problems of inequality still persist in our society, even though with all the programs we have to fight against it. It's true that in many countries we observe some practices against people according to its race, gender, social status, nationality, and social level. And in the light of these scenarios, the competent agencies of United Nations, the governments, and the public powers of the whole world have adopted actions to fight against these problems. So those who assume the parliaments, because they are the representatives of people in general, and those that have the sovereignty of the people, face this disease, these characteristics. This cannot remain aside to search for solutions. The parliaments must promote a fair world, a sustainable planet, providing its contributions in the solutions of problems, defining policies that ensure the food safety, food and nutritional safety of those people, with the role of political supervision, accountability, proposing legislative initiatives and approval of bills, and of course in this direction. The Parliament of Equatorial Guinea is supporting all the effort to eradicate hunger hunger, poverty, inequality in the national level, supporting all the policies of the government in the sense with the approval of a budget for social expenses, agriculture, fishing, and environment in the bills approved in the general budget of the government that is submitted annually to the Parliament to be considered. Thank you very much.
Agradeço ao presidente da Câmara Baixa do Parlamento da
I'd like to thank the President of the lower house of Equatorial Guinea, now Mr. Week Eve, Vice President of the High Chamber of the Parliament of France, for his address.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, the number of people exposed to hunger in the world increases non-stop, and this growth won't stop. The pandemic of COVID and major conflicts such as the one that has been taking place in Ukraine made the situation worse. Without questioning this production of agriculture that have a consequence on states to ensure their food sovereignty, to guarantee their autonomy in serious crisis. And the rapid changes with more extreme situations are damaging the agriculture, and food sovereignty and security of millions of people is worsening, and production intensified has negative effects on climate. We have to find quick solutions to adapt our agriculture to this context. Food security is not only a matter of quantity, but of quality. To fight malnutrition is to focus on a balanced diet, since many people would suffer from lacks of nutrition. We see that it's a problem of inequalities and poverty. Food security is one of the priorities of France's external action and one of the priority areas of its development aid policy with our neighbors of the European Union. This priority is part of its bilateral cooperation in favor of developing countries, but also at the multilateral level through its support for FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. And in 2024, France is devoting nearly 350 million euros to this priority, an amount that has increased considerably over the past 10 years. Furthermore, France particularly supports the World Committee of Food Security. Through its recommendations, it aims to implement this food ensuring and for agriculture role and developing nutrition. This strategy has many goals. To strengthen nutrition in France, this action aims at supporting the vulnerable and children, which is a priority for France. Another important objective is to encourage the development of sustainable agricultural systems and agri-food sectors. This involves promoting the creation of decent jobs in rural areas and family farming, to favor the development of agricultural practices that respect the environment and are mindful of sustainable resource management. Since 1st January 2024, all meals served in collective catering must contain at least 50% sustainable products and at least 20% from organic farming. Dear colleagues, what specific role can parliaments play in this area? First of all, it should be remembered that they are the ones who ratify international instruments, who commit states and encourage them to act. The ratification by the French Parliament in 2017 of the International Convention on Food Assistance, for example, contributed to increasing the funding granted for this purpose. Then parliamentarians are responsible for examining and voting on laws, such as the French laws of 2014 and 2021 on development aid, which sets the framework for public action in this area. Parliamentarians, like us, also examine and vote on the appropriations allocated to development and aid and monitor the action of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and operators such as the French Development Agency, which are responsible for implementing it. We propose adjustments if necessary. And we published on France's development policy last July, and the report makes several proposals aimed, for example, at improving the coordination of the instruments, ensuring the distribution of French aid, and streamlining their procedures. Thus, parliaments have real room for action to guide strategic choices and mobilize the necessary resources to increase food security on a global scale. This is a fundamental responsibility given the importance of this issue. Thank you very much for your attention.
Je remercie le monsieur vice-président.
And the floor to Ms. Avelar, President of the International Organism, for her address.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The President of the Parliament of Brazil said to us tomorrow that the G20 produces 80% of the wealth of the world and 75% of the business, the trade in the world. Here in this room, in this event, dear colleagues, members of parliament, we have the political strength that can change the history of the human being, because living with being hungry in a world that produces so many food, it's a scandal, and it's impossible to accept to live in so poverty conditions. It's hard to see the human being live in this condition and the human dignity, and it happens daily, and we cannot make it normal in our mind, and it cannot be only an information or statistics that sometimes we even hide these numbers. So the hungry level in the world have reached an historical record. In last years, the number of people in the severe hungry situation have duplicated in Americas and Caribbean region. The specific situations that are alarming, where 22% of people from South American, Latin American, Caribbean do not have the resources enough to have a healthy diet. Food safety, it's not only about to produce food enough, but to ensure that this food reach every people, every person in the world. Currently, the food unsafety reach people in a non-proportional way for those that are in a poverty situation in rural areas, migrants, indigenous people, among other traditional people that live at the margin due to the inequality, economic inequality, and also its stigmatization. We already have the debate that the inequality is the root cause of poverty. This is something that must lead us to think in a creative and wide way, with deep love to the human being, a new sense of humanity that may born in the humanity to face this, because these inequalities threaten the access to food, also harming health and the health of people. Rural women produce 50% of food in Latin America, and they are responsible for the food in their houses, and they do not have the rights about the assets they produce. They face gaps of gender and do not have access to water, better salary, financial ways, digital technology, due to the social normatives that do not consider them. Even being all the wealth and being fertile lands, the human activity have led to ground degradation, agricultural contamination, together to the need to depend on fossil fuel that have caused a huge impact in the ecosystem, and this also affected the quality of production, mainly in the family agriculture. The actions performed by the Parliament. It's key action when we base our actions in science and participative process and international cooperation, and can be key to rethinking in the food system, global food system, and in a smart way to promote the food safety to all. In Parliamentary, we point out to this world where, based to the evidence of science, we can count with tools and procedures, and we have done some efforts in what we understand to install these topics, to approach this. In the statements we did in the organization of our climate change network, we have recognized that the actions done by parliaments, when are based in scientific evidence and participative process, can be very important. This is why we believe, dear Parliament colleagues, this is a very sensitive topic that not only may be in the agenda of the events, but also gives substantive actions to find a world without hunger. Latin America feeds half of the world, and we have problems with food. It's unacceptable. And here is the time, and her microphone was closed.
I thank the President of the Parliamentarians, and I'd like to hand over to Fabiana Martins, President of the Mercosul Parliament, for her speech.
Dear colleagues, my ladies and gentlemen, as the President of the Mercosul Parliament, it's a great honor to be here with you, sharing all these experiences. And I regret that we are talking about, again, these crucial topics like the hunger, the absence of the social balance. And it's time to have the determination and the self-criticism of how to face hunger, poverty, and inequality. The numbers that we have from FAO, they are alarming. In 2021, we have around 712 and 750 million people in hunger in global terms. And this has increased because of the pandemic, the wars, and also the climate changes. For the 2030, we project 650 million of people that will still face this crisis. But there are realities that we still see from 2015 up until today. And we have gathered together for five times a year, and we still see numbers that we are above the limit of the 2008 year, which was the biggest limit in the whole history. And this invites us to reflect and to see that there is something that we didn't do well. There is something that's not coming out well. There is an action that clearly is not the correct one, or it's not providing the proper outcomes we are expecting. So we have to face this critical challenge. And the numbers are much more than statistics. They represent millions of lives, millions of histories of pain. It reflects the devastating impact of the inadequate policies. As a representative of our people, we have the responsibility to change the scenario. The report from the UN shows us that we have gone back to 2008 in our numbers, and this is unacceptable. It's urgent to understand that hunger and the food insecurity is not the consequence of external factors alone, but they are the reflection of the political decisions. The world is producing enough food, as the senator has mentioned so far, to feed all the population in the world, and we are still committing mistakes. What are our mistakes? And in the worst case scenario, who is responsible for that? The bad distribution and the access to the equality is perpetuating the hunger. And in this context, it's fundamental to highlight the role of the Parliamentary Front against hunger in the Parlasur. And in our front, in the Parliamentary Front against the hunger in the worldwide level, has more than 500 legislators and with a very strong women leadership. And our Parliamentary Front that's being led by young parliamentarians that accept the experience of the more experienced parliamentarians. They decided to territorialize the actions in a way that they can generate the policies in a more feasible way. And if we don't act for the 2030, more than 582 million people will keep on being chronically unfed. And this is something that can happen in the future. It can concretize in the future. And if we don't do actions in 10 years, and we come back to talk about the same things, we require and we demand to have a genuine commitment to have the eradication of hunger. And when I talk about genuinity, it's that we have to have the humility to know as parliamentarians that we have not done something of good in 10 years. And to conclude, I would like to share with you and to invite you to actually try to look for the ways to achieve the outcomes and to analyze why we are not getting to that. And the Parliament of Mercosur will always call to these type of topics. We need to talk about them, and we are aware of them. And I just leave you the invitation just to conclude, because I invite you to rethink the way that we actually can help the inhabitants in the world that need the most, and not only the possibility and the intention of having long conversations. Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank the President of the Mercosur Parliament, and I'd like to reiterate to all delegation representatives that the rule of this session, as regards the time, is 5 minutes, defined for each speaker, so that everyone will have the same time. 30 seconds before, there will be a ring to warn you that you have 30 seconds left. So I do ask that you observe the time. It is a way to treat everyone equally. Now I'd like to hand over to Mr. Alejandro Ismael Murat Hinojosa, member of the upper house of the Mexican Parliament.
Dear friends and colleagues, I thank you for this great opportunity to address myself to you in this summit, to share with you the great advances that Mexico has had in its social policies focused in reducing poverty and inequality. In our country, the President Claudia Sheinbaum have identified as Mexican humanism that in few words can be reduced to 3 P. The first is the progress, but a shared progress. The second P, it's linked to planet, and the third P, it's linked to people. This is the way we can reach the real sustainable development. In Mexico, what we did was generated social programs in the last 6 years that have allowed us, for instance, to remove more than 9 million Mexican people from poverty, according to data from World Bank. But please allow me to tell me how we did it. What we did firstly was to ensure through universal pension programs, for instance, to adults, where we have more than 50 million Mexicans that are over 60, so they receive a social support from government. Of course, strength social programs focused in vulnerable groups as women, and also allow that women over 60 receive direct support. Also the youth, especially those that have finished university, they also receive support to work in the market, and of course in the basis level, the basic education, they have a scholarship that we've called Benito Juarez to support all children that want to go to school, to attend school. Of course, we also support 1.5 million of handicapped people in our country. So these programs currently, they serve more than 80% of the population. And what we have done in last months is to increase this and lead is to the institutional level. It means to ensure that in different articles of our constitution that these social programs will be there to maintain this support to population. I also would like to tell you that through studies and research from different international organizations as the Pan American Bank and World Bank have shown in a clear way that monetize the social programs, it's pretty much more efficient to reduce the inequality and poverty in the global level because it allows people to take better decisions, to make a better decision. But the most important thing in public policy was linked to the wage raise in my country. I would like to share with you that the former President Andrés Manuel Obrador have raised the minimum wage in more than 100%. And this information, this data, of course, are those that have allowed Mexico today to have the reduction, the biggest reduction in poverty, moving from a country with 60% of poverty to 40% of poverty in our country. Of course, we still have challenges to face. We have challenges ahead. And the President Claudia Sheinbaum have also ensured that next month she will also lead it to a constitutional level, giving support to the youth for high school, so they will also receive the necessary support and attend school. In few words, just to conclude, the historical inversion of 2.3 billion pesos, 80% of population in Mexico receives social support, and the World Bank have recognized that we have reduced the poverty in more than 9 million Mexican citizens. Thank you very much, colleagues.
I'd
like to thank the representative of the upper house of Mexico. Now, let's listen to Ms. Noneli Noatrit, Vice President of the lower house of the Parliament of South Africa, for her address.
Honorable presiding officers and colleagues, various challenges posed by violent conflicts, geopolitical tensions, and the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic are hindering our achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The 2024 Global Multidimensional Poverty Index reveals that out of 6.3 billion individuals worldwide, 1.1 billion are experiencing severe multidimensional poverty, with more than half of them being children. Frequent deprivations globally encompass insufficient housing, sanitation, electricity, cooking fuel, nutrition, and school attendance. Progress in poverty reduction have been set back by conflicts that have been intensifying in recent years, pushing millions of people into humanitarian crises. According to the Global Peace Index 2024, 97 countries experienced a decline in peacefulness, the highest number since the index was created in 2008. These findings call for urgent global action to prioritize conflict-affected settings to ensure that no one is left behind in the pursuit of poverty eradication. They also imply the need for serious and sustained efforts to prevent further conflict from shattering crucial infrastructure, consequently rolling back progress and ballooning the cost of development. The G20 must collaborate with the international community, notably the United Nations, to offer tailored assistance, reconstruct disrupted systems, and establish avenues for those significantly affected by conflicts. Regarding food security, I welcome the upcoming launch of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, as initiated under Brazil G20 presidency at the G20 Leaders Summit in Rio de Janeiro later this month. The alliance represents a critical step towards fostering solidarity and coordinated action among G20 members and others in addressing the pressing issues of hunger and poverty on a global scale. G20 parliaments will have important contributions to make through their lawmaking, oversight, and appropriation mandates towards making this alliance truly impactful. Honourable Presiding Officers and colleagues, in South Africa, food and nutrition security is a constitutional right. Several initiatives have been implemented to ensure that people have enough nutritious food to eat. These include the child support grant, school feeding schemes, and farmer support programs. Moreover, the social relief of distress grant, introduced by government at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, has had a significant positive impact on food poverty and on local economies. Our government has also exempted basic food items from value-added tax and is considering expanding this exemption. Despite these measures, a significant portion of the population still grapples with hunger on a daily basis. This, coupled with food waste amounting to nearly a third of annual food production and rising financial pressures faced by households, underscores the complexity of the food security challenge in South Africa. Various global and local factors have contributed to increased pressure on food prices, including adverse weather conditions, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and trade policies such as the temporary banning of grain exports from major grain-producing countries. In response, the South African government introduced the Agriculture and Agro-Processing Master Plan to enhance agricultural infrastructure, expand market access, and provide support to smallholder farmers for better integration into the broader agricultural economy. The plan has achieved tangible outcomes, such as the creation of new jobs and support for black commercial contract farmers. Significantly, this plan is the outcome of collaboration between labour, government, civil society and industry, aiming to promote inclusive growth, competitiveness, transformation, employment and food security. Our parliamentary oversight committees on agriculture have been critical in ensuring effective implementation of this master plan. In conclusion, the role of G20 parliaments is pivotal in mitigating hunger and poverty and ensuring food security. Through collaborative action, oversight and policy making, G20 parliaments can play a crucial role in shaping a more equitable and resilient future for all. I thank you.
I would like to thank Ms. Vice President of the lower house of the Parliament of South Africa, and I would like to hand the floor to Ms. Licia Ronzulli, the Vice President of the upper house of Italy.
Presidenti, colleagues, we are here today to speak about one of the most severe crises of our time, a huge challenge we can no longer ignore and that we have to face at global level, like the 2030 Agenda, the sustainable development, the elimination of extreme poverty, and any kind of malnutrition to guarantee food security to all. We're still far from achieving these goals. Today, around 800 million people in the world still suffer chronic hunger, among which millions of children that don't receive the nutrition they need to grow healthy and strong. This tragedy increases every year. And to aggravate that, we have an increase in food prices, in the disruption of supply chains. Hunger is not only about food, it also has devastating consequences for health, for hygiene, for access to water. And as we speak, climate change is making the situation worse, creating uncertainties and instabilities. In order to achieve the zero hunger goal, we need to transform the food systems to make them sustainable and just. We have to implement concrete policies that will improve food access, that will face the root causes of food insecurity. So what can parliaments do to achieve those goals? Concrete proposals such as laws to reduce inequalities. That means to approve or enact legislation that guarantee equal opportunities, that provide companies with instruments to guarantee jobs. In Italy, we are moving in that direction. In the first 2 years of the new legislature, 20% of the laws enacted regarded economy, environment, agriculture. Italy considers food security a priority in its foreign policy. We carefully look at Africa, where the food crisis is especially dramatic. It is not by chance that the Italian Senate, which I have the honor to represent here, hosted an Italy-Africa summit where the strategic partnership with the Italian and African partnership was discussed, and also Mattei Plan, which will favor the cooperation, the reduction of inequalities in the African continent, which is often the origin of sufferance, of migration. The Mattei Plan intends to develop the resources and potential of Africa in a just and sustainable way. During the G7 under Italian presidency last June, food security was a priority in the discussions. We should not forget that extreme poverty forces millions of people to live under $2 a day, and that is not only an economic matter. It is a moral failure. Every person deserves to have access to whatever he or she needs to live with dignity. In order to reduce poverty, we have to reduce the territorial disparity and invest in modern infrastructure and basic services. In order to face hunger, we have to work together. Governments, parliaments, international organizations, the private sphere, and the civil society. International cooperation is essential to share resources and best practices. And it is also the time to encourage the private sector and sustainable resources that can make a difference. We can leave no one behind, and each one of us plays a crucial role in this path. Thank you. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Presidents Pacheco and Lira for the excellent organization of this forum, and especially thank the interpreters who allow us to follow the discussion in all the languages. Thank you.
Ms. Vice President of the Upper House of the Parliament of Italy. Now I'll hand the floor to Ms. Shri Harivansh, Vice President of the Upper House of the Parliament of India, for his address.
Honorable Chairperson, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Namaskar, boa tarde. I greet you on behalf of the Parliament and 1.4 billion people of India. India stands before you as a land of remarkable diversity, culture, and rich history, shaped by both challenges and triumphs. Our journey has enhanced our understanding of the critical role that parliaments play in addressing hunger, poverty, and inequality. With a population of over 1.4 billion, India reflects the global struggles against these issues. but it also serves as a beacon of resilience, innovation, and hope in solving these issues. We may recall that during the G20 summit in India, that world leaders were united in their commitment to eradicate poverty and hunger. The G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration pledged to enhance global food security, reduce inequality, and eliminate poverty. India has always been at the forefront in tackling hunger. The National Food Security Act of 2013, known as the Right to Food Act, provides subsidized food grains to nearly 2/3 of the population, ensuring that food security is a fundamental right for millions of Indians. Distinguished delegates, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, launched during the pandemic, continues to provide free food grains to over 810 million people, showcasing our commitment to the most vulnerable. India has also prioritized tackling malnutrition through targeted interventions for children, adolescent girls, pregnant women, and lactating mothers, such as Poshan Abhiyan, Anganwadi services, scheme for adolescent girls, and Pradhan Mantri Matri Vandan Yojana. India's flagship financial inclusion programs, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, empowers millions through access to bank accounts. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, a national housing scheme, aims to provide affordable housing to those living in poverty. I'm glad to share that more than 420 million houses have been provided so far. Further, the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has focused on improving sanitation, which has a direct impact on health and well-being. Over 110 million toilets and more than 23,000 community sanitary complexes have been built under this program. The Ayushman Bharat scheme, a game changer for low-income families, provides health insurance to over 120 million families. It has ensured that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. The Parliament of India passed the Right to Education Act 2009, ensuring free and compulsory education for children ages 6 to 14. It is playing a crucial role in not only breaking the cycle of hunger, poverty, inequality, but also opening doors to opportunities. As a result of sustained efforts, India has been able to pull out about 250 million people from poverty between 2013-14 and 2022-23. I would like to repeat again, as a result of sustained and continuous efforts, India has been able to pull out about 250 million people from hunger, poverty between 2013-14 and 2022-23. Distinguished delegates, our Parliament has acted swiftly and decisively to pass legislation to bring about transformative changes and addresses the root cause of hunger, poverty, and inequality. Parliaments must ensure adequate funds for such programs and transparency in their implementation. Budgetary oversight mechanisms and parliamentary committees play an essential and crucial role in this process. In India, the Public Accounts Committee and the Estimate Committees are pivotal in ensuring that benefits of public services reach their intended and targeted beneficiaries. The Indian Constitution guarantees equality and non-discrimination. The provisions like reserved seats for scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and women have played a crucial role in enhancing their representation. Distinguished delegates, India is committed to sharing its experiences and learnings with others and working together to address our common challenges. I congratulate the Congress of Brazil for their excellent leadership and arrangement of the P20 process. Thank you. Obrigado.
I'd like to thank the Vice President of the Upper House of the Indian Parliament. And this moment, I would like to hand over Mr. Meshal Al-Faham as Vice President
da Arábia Saudita para o seu pronunciamento.
شكرا معالي رئيس الجلسة، أصحاب السعادة، رؤساء وأعضاء الوفود، الحضور الكريم. تقدم بالشكر الجزيل للبرلمان البرازيلي على الدعوة لحضور أعمال هذا المؤتمر وعلى كرم الضيافة وحسن الاستقبال. مثمنا عاليا إطلاق البرازيل التحالف العالمي لمكافحة الجوع والفقر خلال القمة السابقة لمجموعة ال20. وأحيطكم أن المملكة العربية السعودية انضمت لهذا التحالف في شهر مايو 2024، وستستضيف المملكة مؤتمر الأمم المتحدة حول الأراضي والجفاف في شهر ديسمبر المقبل في مدينة الرياض. ويسعدني أن أعرض لكم نموذج المملكة في مكافحة الفقر والجوع على المستوى الوطني والدولي. فعلى المستوى الوطني أصدرت الحكومة قرارات وسن مجلس الشورى تشريعات.
This occasion highlights the shared responsibilities we bear as parliamentarians in building a world where justice and sustainability are not mere ideals but lived realities. Distinguished Parliament members, ladies and gentlemen, our world stands at profound crossroads, driven forward by remarkable technological advances and breakthroughs that reshape our lives, yet confronted by urgent environmental and resource challenges that threaten our collective future. It is as if we navigate stormy seas with one hand reaching towards the promise of a brighter future and the other holding firm against the waves that threaten our shared survival. As parliamentarians, our role extends beyond the chambers of legislation. We are entrusted by our peoples for their collective hopes and tasked with ensuring that progress does not leave behind inequality, that justice knows no borders, and that opportunity is not a privilege to some, but a universal right to all. Together, we need to ensure that our chase for innovation complements with our duty to protect and preserve the planet that sustains us. Considering this, the urgency of our mission becomes even clearer when we consider the hard environmental and climate change facts. Climate change alone is projected to cost the global economy $23 trillion by 2050 if left unaddressed, affecting nations rich and poor alike. Rising temperatures, sea level increase, and extreme weather events are already forcing millions to migrate from their homes, with predictions suggesting up to 1.2 billion climate refugees by 2035, mainly from the south to the north. Meanwhile, our planet's resources face unprecedented strain as the global population is expected to exceed 9 billion within the next 3 decades. If current consumption patterns continue, we would need nearly 2 Earths to sustain future generations. These figures are not just statistics. They are a call to action for each of us to legislate with foresight, responsibility, and a commitment to safeguarding our shared future. Distinguished colleagues, in this spirit, the UAE, like many nations represented here, understands that sustainability is not a choice. It is an imperative. To this end, proudly hosted COP28 and building on the many sustainability initiatives and practices achieved in 2023, the President, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, has declared that the year of sustainability will continue into 2024, reinforcing UAE's commitments to environmental protection and its pledge to support global sustainability efforts. Such commitments, the UAE believes, demand a shared responsibility among all nations, since the consequences of environmental changes transcend borders and distinction, and since true environmental justice requires that we view our world through a unified lens. Esteemed colleagues, accordingly, for a sustainable planet, it is more urgent now than ever for national, regional, and international parliamentary institutions to emphasize that driving a structural shift towards the more
Agradeço ao senhor vice-presidente Michel Al-Faham Aslami e concedo a palavra nesse instante ao senhor Deng Xiuxin, membro do Parlamento da China, para o seu pronunciamento.
尊敬的主席，各位代表，
First of all, I want to thank Brazil for your warm reception and thoughtful arrangements. I am the Vice Chairman of the Committee of Agriculture and Rural Affairs of the Chinese National People's Congress. I'm very happy to see you all and discuss with you on the very important issue of the contribution of parliaments to the fight against hunger, poverty, and inequality. The current international landscape is undergoing transformation and turmoil, with security disorder, uneven development, and ineffective governance becoming more pronounced. To actively address hunger, poverty, and inequality and the serious threats and challenges they have posed to global peace and development, I believe parliaments can focus on the following areas. First, take eradication of extreme poverty together as the priority. We should prioritize poverty reduction and make sure that development resources be given to poverty reduction, education, healthcare, infrastructure, and other livelihood areas to provide necessary technological support for developing countries, eradicate all forms of discrimination and bias, and to create necessary conditions to lift women who account for more than half of the poor in the world. We need to strengthen exchange of experiences so that we can help with formulating targeted and effective policy reduction, poverty reduction policies. Second, we need to join hands in addressing food security. Around 733 million people faced hunger in 2023. We need to formally oppose the politicization, instrumentalization, and weaponization of food issues. Countries who are major food producers and net exporters should work to reduce trade and technology barriers to increase supply in the market. Countries should strengthen cooperation on international market regulation to build an open, stable, and sustainable commodity market. Third, stay committed to strengthening international cooperation. We should uphold true multilateralism, maintain the central coordinating role of the United Nations, and support the work of the FAO and the WHO and other international organizations. Special support should be given to capacity building in developing countries. Developed countries should provide assistance in areas such as funding, technology, and market access to help developing countries enhance their capacity in poverty alleviation, food production and storage, and reduction of losses. China is the country with the largest population of poverty reduction and is the first to achieve the UN Millennium Development Goals. In 2020, China successfully lifted nearly 100 million rural poor people out of poverty, achieving a decisive victory in the fight against poverty. With 9% of the world's arable land and 6% of its freshwater resources, China manages to feed nearly 1/5 of the world's population, and our annual grain production has exceeded 650 million tons for 9 consecutive years, contributing our share to the global fight against poverty and hunger. China is also committed to fostering development around the world. We have made food security as one of the 8 priority areas of the Global Development Initiative, actively engaging in global food security governance. Belt and Road Cooperation has created 420,000 jobs in participating countries and helped lift about 40 million people out of poverty, providing more opportunities for development worldwide. China's National People's Congress is the body through which the people exercise state power. On poverty reduction and food security, the NPC have earnestly fulfilled our responsibility of legislation and oversight. We have revised the Seed Law and introduced the law on promotion of rural revitalization, the law on black soil conservation, and so forth. Going forward, we will formulate the Grain Security Guarantee Law and the Farmland Protection Law, continue to enhance our work and provide sound legal guarantee to safeguard food security, consolidate poverty reduction achievements, and advance rural revitalization. Dear colleagues, President Xi proposed that no one and no country should be left behind on the journey toward modernization. China's NPC is ready to work with parliaments of all countries and multilateral parliamentary organizations to work together to make greater contribution for more inclusive, equitable, and resilient development. Thank you all.
I'd like to thank Mr. Deng Qiuxin from the Parliament of China. Now we're going to listen to Lord House of Liverpool, Vice President of the Upper House of the United Kingdom.
I would like to thank by starting our hosts for their leadership, their warm welcome, and their hospitality. Dear fellow parliamentarians, across the world, acute hunger is at a 5-year high, with over 280 million people in need of emergency assistance, and catastrophic famine risks increasing, particularly in areas where there are conflicts. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are around 733 million people, and that's 1 in 5 in Africa, facing hunger and undernourishment last year. And almost 1/3 of the people in the world are unable to afford a healthy diet. Climate change exacerbates this problem, leading not just to crop failures, but also it has a detrimental effect on the nutritional value of crops. We see increased extreme weather events, with flooding at one end of the scale, as we saw in Spain last week, and at the other, drying rivers and waterways that are depleted of their fish, as we have seen in some of the tributaries of the River Amazon. Progress is also held back by economic stresses, including debt and local and global price volatility. Conflicts are driving up need within countries, and countries across the globe are voicing concerns about future food security. Women and girls and those with disabilities and other marginalized populations are disproportionately affected. Nearly half of the deaths among children under 5 years of age are linked to undernutrition. The social, economic, and emotional costs of this are huge for those who are directly impacted now. But if we do not act now, then the future costs will be even worse right the way across the globe. Within this challenging context, we in the United Kingdom have been pleased to see Brazil place the fight against hunger and poverty at the center of its mission for the G20 presidency. The Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, endorsed by all G20 ministers at the Development Ministers' meeting in July, builds on Brazil's internationally renowned domestic successes in tackling poverty and inequality. This alliance of countries and organizations will collectively allow us to increase political support, unlock much-needed finance, and build more equitable partnerships to eliminate hunger and extreme poverty. I know that the UK government has been a close ally to Brazil in delivering on this agenda. The United Kingdom has led support for the Alliance Task Force with expertise, co-financed a technical report on resource mobilization by the UK think tank ODI, offered to join the Board of Champions, and worked to galvanize our development, civil society, academia, and international networks in support of the Alliance. And the UK government is committed to continuing to address the causes of food insecurity and malnutrition, making expertise and investment available to help countries transform their food and farming systems to be more productive, nutritious, and sustainable. The programs delivered by our government, including the Commercial Agriculture for Smallholders and Agribusiness Program, and our long-standing support for AgDevCo, mobilized much-needed finance and technical assistance to help vulnerable farmers and businesses in Africa and Asia increase their productivity and urgently adapt to climate change. The work of our government on this vital agenda is also scrutinized, strengthened, and supported by our Parliament, which is actively engaged in the global fight against hunger, poverty, and inequality. And I can assure you, as an independent Deputy Speaker of our upper house, the House of Lords, I can assure you that the commitment to respond to this challenge extends across all of our major parties and features prominently in the work of our chamber. Our membership includes many strong voices who ensure that we remain focused upon the steps needed to eliminate hunger and extreme poverty. I am sure that these strong voices will continue to be heard and that our actions will help to deliver the change we need. Muito obrigado.
I'd like to thank Mr. Vice President of the Upper House of the Parliament of the United Kingdom. I would like to hand the floor to Ms. Julieta Villalpando Riquelme, member of the Lower House of the Parliament of Mexico, for her address.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Good afternoon, all my dear colleagues. I would like to highlight the commitment of Mexico to combat the inequalities of gender and also to promote the economic autonomy of our women. The Chamber of Representatives has impulsed some initiatives to eradicate the salary gap that we have between the genders. And in our country, we have 100 pesos that one man earns, one woman is going to earn 65 pesos. And this is only possible because of the recent approval of the reformations that have the legal framework in the Constitution for the social programs, making that to be a right for these women. And then these programs not only include the gender perspective in their institutional design, but also include specific policies as the pension for welfare of women. This is a transfer economic program for women 60 to 64 years old that will decrease the gap of salary because of the gender. And I'd like to share that now that we have this large dress, because we have for the first time a woman ahead of the presidency of our republic, Dr. Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo, and we are in charge, and she put us in charge several constitutional reforms, and we know that we are a Congress that is impulsionating the basis of what will be this new government that will change and will transform Mexico, and we feel very proud, all the Mexicans, of this opportunity. It's been for 200 years that we didn't have the opportunity to do so, and it's the first time that we live in a big transformation. We achieve the second level of a transformation in Mexico. And in the state level, a highlighted example is the Rosa program that allows women from 18 to 55 years old in the poverty situation that dedicate to the household works. It allows them to increase their economic income by the economic and activities that contribute to improve the situations. And these are necessary because we are considering in the country that 53.5% of the 54.5 million of women that live there, which means that 28.5 million women, they don't have a remunerated job. So in this context, the Chamber of Representatives is responsible for the approval of the income budget of the Federation. We took this project as a key factor to achieve the equality of gender, with the purpose of guaranteeing that women can access and can be benefited from the budgets of the state. In this way, in Mexico, we have implemented, we have strengthened as well the general law for the equality between men and women. And ever since we had the approval in 2016, we regulated the mechanisms like the system and the program, national programs for the equality between men and women. We have involved different sectors of factories and governmental sectors to achieve a more equitable inclusion. And in this way, the economic autonomy of these women is not seen uniquely as an income issue, but also as an essential link in their empowerment and in their participation in our society. Thank you so much for your attention to listen to me.
I thank you, the representative of the lower house of Mexico, and I'd like to hand over to Mr. Jorge Santiago Pauli, member of the lower house of the Argentinian Parliament, for his pronunciation.
Dear delegates, about the conflict mentioned previously, I'd like to tell you that Argentina confirmed firmly, as we did, we condemn all the terrorist attacks that Israel has suffered, a country that is a model of democracy, and we also support its right of defense and the human rights. About the panel, we are now fight against the poverty and hunger. It's in our agenda. The story of the human being, it's there to improve our life, and we live in a capitalism. Thanks to the capitalism and all the commerce and trade, we started to win this fight. And 80-20, we have people and a percentage of people that was in poverty, and it was reduced, and it was not international policies that have provoked the poverty in the world, but the fomentation of tasks, the investments, savings and local investment. On the opposite, as Argentinians, we know by our experience, when government and legislators wanted to address the economic development, they just create more misery. The problem is not inequality, the problem is the poverty. It's not about take from those that have more, but make that all progress. Unfortunately, most of the time, politicians may think that they know more than society, and the legislature attacking the freedom of people just to get the results that harm everybody. This is what Hayek here was talking about, referring when talking about arrogance. We have more than examples in Argentina. Legislation to fix prices of food, to limit the internal and external trade, and deficit in the budget, reduction of an investment of money to foment collectivism policies. In the past, we punished the only sector that can help us, the private sector. As legislators, we may stop thinking that we may have provoke an economic change, but we may start to think that we have to defend the right of people, right to property, to life. In this way, we will allow the private sector to do what they do best, to produce, to create jobs, and being the engine of a society that develops each time more and more. Legislators of this required to be humble, know how to legislate, and understand how the world works. But the same way society have prospered in the past, they can also do it again this way. We all here have the same wish: eradicate poverty and hunger in our countries. We just have to agree and think what's the best way to do that. Thank you very much.
I'd like
to thank the representative of the lower house of the Parliament of Argentina. I'd like to address to the plenary that due to the address of Mr. Michel Al-Lami of Saudi Arabia, there was a mistake in the content of the translation of the simultaneous interpretation for the members of this conference, in a way that this conference would like to ask His Excellency, the Vice President of the Parliament of Saudi Arabia, to come back and have your address again to guarantee that the translation of the content of your address with
تقدم بالشكر الجزيل للبرلمان البرازيلي على الدعوة لحضور
Your Excellencies, Speaker.
كرم الضيافة وحسن الاستقبال
I would like to extend my thanks and gratitude to the Brazilian Parliament for the invitation to attend and participate in the works of this conference, and for the hospitality and warm welcome. Also, I highly appreciate the launching of the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty by Brazil during the previous summit of the G20. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia joined this alliance in May 2024 and will host the UN Conference on Land and Drought in the upcoming month of December in Riyadh City. I am pleased to present to you the model of the Kingdom in combating hunger and poverty on the national and international level. On the national level, the government has issued resolutions, and the Shura Council has enacted legislations that address hunger, poverty, and inequality, which provided a social security network based on 6 main pillars, which are: 1, the social insurance programs, which include the cooperative health insurance, the pension law, and laws of unemployment insurance. 2, the governmental support, which includes food, fuel, water, and electricity support, and others. 3, the direct support for citizens, which includes free education from kindergarten to university, healthcare, the Citizens Account Program, housing support program, educational programs, shelter care programs, and special needs care programs. Moreover, the custodian of the 2 holy mosques directs every year the disbursement of the month of Ramadan aid to the social insurance beneficiaries, $802 million. 4, the special support for labor market, which includes wage protection program, employment support program, and the job seekers assistance program. 5, the establishment of the Social Development Bank with a capital of $12.42 billion. The total financing of the bank in the first half of this year, 2024, reached $1.2 billion, benefiting 70,000 citizens. 6, the number of charities that contribute directly to the process of supporting the needy has reached 686. As a result of implementing these policies, the unemployment rate reached its lowest record in the history of the Kingdom at 7.1% in the second half of this year, 2024, which puts Saudi Arabia in the first place among the G20 countries in terms of low unemployment, according to the report of the International Labour Organization that was published last April. The rate of unemployment localization in high-skilled jobs increased to 39%. The Human Resources Development Fund financed the private sector employment and training programs with $18 billion, and 1.1 million jobs were created in the private sector. The number of small family businesses or productive families benefiting from the Social Development Bank increased to reach more than 177,000, which sales volume of more than $3.46 billion. On the international level, the Kingdom has been keen to support and develop humanitarian and charitable work. In the period from 1975 to 2024, it provided $133 billion as developmental aid to 171 countries around the world, financing 7,090 humanitarian, developmental, and relief projects. King Salam Humanitarian Aid and Relief Center is currently working on more than 1,700 projects to combat hunger and poverty. Regarding the Kingdom's efforts against inequality, the Kingdom joined the International Labour Organization Convention on Equal Remuneration for Men and Women Workers for work of equal value 100. Thank you very much.
Agradeço ao senhor vice-presidente do Parlamento da Arábia Saudita. Concedo a palavra neste momento.
Now I'd like to hand over Mr. Lindsay Royal, President of the Lower House, the House of Commons of the UK.
Can I first of all say what a pleasure it is to be here with colleagues from parliaments across the P20. Can I thank Mr. President and, of course, Parliament of Brazil for giving us such a warm welcome. And it is a privilege to be here in this wonderful Parliament. But can I also say from the outset how pleased I am that we participate in global grouping, which contains not only sovereign states, but the European Union, the African Union. Together we can achieve so much. It's important for all of us that everyone, wherever they live, have access to food, resources to live with dignity, and the respect to maintain that dignity. Inequality corrodes society. But though there is an agreement that these problems must be tackled and tackled urgently, at least in the United Kingdom, we have acknowledged that the fine details of policy are fixed at government level. That does not mean that Parliament and the House of Commons is in particularly powerless. A government which did not command our support would not remain in power for very long. But it does mean that our power is indirect. It depends on having committed, knowledgeable MPs who speak to their colleagues. It depends on people able to make a case for change, on having structures which allow them to be effective. And I've got to say, I'm pleased to say the House of Commons, we have mechanisms that are making sure that government has the focus on the global fight, has to report regularly to Parliament on what it's doing, to listen to the voices of parliamentarians. And that's why it's so important. Successive governments have failed to reach that target. But when they do, they face political consequences. They must report on the performance of Parliament, and we can hold them to account. Although the UK Parliament policy is now run from the Foreign Office, the House of Commons has retained a dedicated select committee to deal with international development. The government has to engage with us in its expert, well-informed members. It cannot ignore the committee report. The committees is focused on issues which are under discussion today. And other committees in our Parliament discuss these issues too. The government is obliged to respond to those committees. I've got to say, it is now upon us all, as I look around the room about the nations coming together. The P20 is there. We should say to each other, what shackles can we remove from countries? The shackles of poverty is there because of the extortionate financial crisis that we place on the poorer countries. So please let us work together. Let us take those financial shackles away. Let us ensure that they can grow their own food. Let us support them with the knowledge on farming. Allow people to have the right to energy as well. It is so important. Let us enshrine that right. But of course, we all know that one of the major causes of hunger and poverty is inequality, is war and conflict. And we know what war and conflict can do. We've seen it in Ukraine, a sovereign state that was invaded, that stopped the grain ships from being able to supply the poorest, yes, the poorest nations in the world. Africa suffered because of that war. That illegal occupation of Ukraine should never have happened. I say no to Russia. Please withdraw. Let us bring peace back to Europe. When we see the troops coming from North Korea, it is a worry. It only takes us one way, and that is through escalation. War shouldn't exist. We need peace. And I say to people in the Middle East, we must work together. Nobody wants to see the suffering of the Palestinians in the way that we're seeing at the moment. But I do say this. We must see the release of the hostages. The Israeli hostages must be released. It is so important. And of course, we must recognize the future of Palestine through a two-state solution. We must work on that. Of course, the poor people of Sudan, the unsung about, the people who are dying in their millions, the suffering that we're seeing. Where are we? Where are we? Let us look to each other. What are we doing to stop these conflicts? How can we help people? How can we work together? I want to see a world of peace. Please, let us take the debt away. Let us work together for peace. It is the only answer. War will solve nothing. Peace is the solution. Please, let's work together.
Thank you. The House of Commons speaker from the UK. Now our speakers list is over. I thank you for your speeches in this session. It was very enriching and contributes for the evolution of the theme to be dealt. I would like to say to the plenary that at 4 p.m. we will have the second working section of the G20 parliamentarians with the theme, the role of parliaments in promoting sustainable development. I declare closed this session. Thank you.
the second session, working session, open the second the summit of the presidents of parliaments of G20 with the topic, the role of parliaments in promoting sustainable in tackling climate crisis and sustainability. Dear ladies and gentlemen, chiefs of delegations, parliamentarians, in the summit of G20 last year in New Delhi, we talked about the sustainable future. Now, in the 10th edition of P20, we suggest searching for alternatives for ecological transition that is fair and inclusive. Sustainable development in its economical aspects, also social and environmental aspects, go through what is considered a push for ecological transition. In this transition, it is up to the parliamentarians to have the sensibility not to dissociate the challenges of distribution of costs and keeping the integrity of the concept of sustainable development. This concept must include in the path of the Agenda 2030 for sustainable development and the final declaration of the first meeting of parliamentary women of P20, the respect and guarantee of dignity of human rights of all persons, regardless of their race, ethnicity, gender, or any other characteristic. In this context, we also highlight that the events of natural disasters such as floods, droughts, windstorms, in addition to calamities provided by human action, having the dispatch of people in the light of the concerns with the intensification of climate events, the extreme climate events, and the impact caused by environmental and human calamities. We invite the parliamentarians to talk about good practices and for preventing and responding to these challenges. Having said these initial considerations, I'd like to hand the floor to Mr. Won-Tik Woo, President of the Parliament of the Republic of Korea.
Honorable parliamentary leaders, good afternoon. I'm Won-Tik Woo, Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. Last year, global greenhouse gas emissions surpassed 57.1 billion tons. It was the highest on record, and G20 countries accounted for 77%. The UN Environmental Program estimates that by 2030, even if national GHG reduction goals are met, that global average temperatures could rise by as much as 2.8 degrees. To stay within the Paris Agreement goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius, multifaceted effort from G20 countries will be required. To this end, the role of national parliaments have become ever more critical. Parties to the Paris Agreement have until February of next year to submit a more stringent national greenhouse gas reduction target. But more importantly, they have to be implemented. Otherwise, the possibility of keeping the 1.5 degree Celsius ceiling will be completely lost and the global temperatures will rise to catastrophic levels. To ensure that the next 2035 NDC does not end up in an exercise in rhetoric, we need to ensure that this is backed by targeted legislation by national parliaments. Republic of Korea in 2022 enacted the Carbon Neutrality Act to legislate greenhouse gas reduction targets. It is also restructuring its industries to be more green and also is implementing energy transition policies. To facilitate such policy trends, the National Assembly has enacted the world's first Hydrogen Act, and discussions are on the way for other legislation such as the Solar Energy Support for Farming Act and Offshore Wind Energy Act, both of which seek to expand renewable energy energy. As we transition to a net zero society, a key legislative concern is that the transition is just and minimizes social inequality. In recent years, for communities experiencing the closure of coal-fired power plants and coal mines, legislation to support alternative industries and job training is being advocated. Such legislative and policy efforts fall under the vision of a climate parliament. From reduced use of disposables to curtailing greenhouse gases in the parliament buildings, various climate action programs are currently underway. The hope is that Parliament spearheading such climate action will catalyze society as a whole.
Distinguished G20 parliamentary leaders, in addition to the legislative efforts to ensure that our countries meet their NDCs, we need to reinforce international cooperation to support green transition of developing countries. The Republic of Korea is expanding its green ODA projects. The committed amount increased from $360 million in 2016 to $2.38 billion in 2022. The Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI, launched under the leadership of the Republic of Korea, plans to invest $2 billion in green investment every year by 2030 and has contributed $300 million to the second replenishment of the GGCF. The National Assembly of Republic of Korea will continue to actively cooperate to ensure that it continues to serve as a green ladder for developing countries. The first and foremost challenge in front of us is to ensure that the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities based on the Paris Agreement is implemented in climate finance negotiation. The Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change starts next week to ensure that the agreement on the establishment of the new collective quantified goal, active roles by the G20 national parliaments are needed. Respected parliamentary leaders, in response to climate change, the role of parliaments has become as essential as that of governments. It is necessary to affirm the parliament's commitment to cooperation and to maintain continuous and effective discussion at the level of parliamentary leadership. I propose the establishment of a speakers-level conference in which leaders such as speakers of parliament who can represent national parliaments on climate change would participate. This includes the possibility of elevating the IPU parliamentary meetings, which is currently held alongside the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In the face of the global challenge of the climate crisis, it is the time for our parliament to present practical and substantial resolution. I ask for your support to unite the capabilities of parliamentary leaders and work together towards sustainable growth. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. And the next speaker, President of Indonesia, Puan Maharani.
Excellencies, the Sustainable Development Goals signify a big vision, a commitment to healthier, more prosperous and sustainable future. But the SDGs are facing huge challenges. Geopolitical tension, hunger, inequalities, and the climate crisis are all rising. Numerous developing countries have been suffering from massive debt burden. The commitment to achieving all the development agenda by 2030 has been jeopardized by various unfortunate events, not to mention the war in Ukraine, political crisis in Myanmar, as well as the endless bombardment and attack of Israel in Gaza, which have resulted in civilians casualties, including women and children. The clock is ticking. Inaction should be unacceptable. The setback that threaten the achievement of SDGs must be tackled now in a collective manner. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development demands meaningful participation of the parliaments to be the agent of change to achieve all the goals. We parliaments must effectively use our authority to adopt relevant laws that uphold the three sustainable development pillars of economic, social, and environmental sustainability. We must allocate sufficient budget to achieve SDGs. We have to formulate high-quality economic growth that will generate high growth and at the same time does not add to inequality. Indonesia is committed to achieving SDGs in a timely manner. SDGs align with our Golden Indonesia 2045 vision to become a sovereign, advanced, just a prosperous country in 2045. However, national measure alone is not enough. Global action is needed. At the international front, parliamentary diplomacy plays a crucial role in promoting global cooperation to address the 21st century major problem. Parliaments of the G20 members need to contribute in building three development drivers on finance, climate, and peace. They become an enabler to make progress in SDGs implementation. The first is finance. Parliaments of the G20 members need to mobilize financial resources, including from private sector, to focus on addressing the development priorities of low and middle income countries. We have also to sharpen the budget allocation nationally and globally, so it will be spent for the real need of the poor. The second is climate action. Given negative impact of climate to the most vulnerable group, especially the poor, we need to put forward ambitious climate action plans. At the same time, we need to make clean energy transition as a new source of economic growth. Clean energy transition can create jobs and reduce poverty. And the third is peace. There is no sustainable development without peace. All our development progress are quickly wiped out by persistent wars and conflict. And the resources we desperately need to feed the poor and educate our children are wasted on military spending. We need peace from Gaza to Ukraine and beyond. We need ceasefire and providing much needed humanitarian assistance in Gaza. Finally, as the world is facing rising geopolitical tension and fragmentation, I call on leaders of Parliament of G20 members to heal division and wars and invest in sustainable development. And it's time to keep the promise of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to create a better world for future generations. Only by working together we can achieve the impossible and leave no one behind. Thank you.
Próxima oradora inscrita, senhora Raymond Gagne, presidente do Senado do Canadá.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, chers collègues parlementaires. Je suis honorée de pouvoir prendre la parole aujourd'hui, de pouvoir échanger avec vous sur cette importante question. Alors, depuis son adoption en 2015, le programme de développement durable encadre les actions de la communauté internationale pour atteindre un monde plus égalitaire. Les 17 objectifs du programme visent à mettre fin à la pauvreté, à réduire les inégalités, à protéger l'environnement et à mettre le monde sur une voie
and put the world on a more sustainable path up to 2030. In spite of all the goodwill, after the end of the program, we have many things waiting. According to the General Secretary of UN, only 17% of the targets are becoming achieved. A third of the targets haven't seen any improvement, and in some cases, even backward steps. Final end of the quote. So for this sustainable development, it depends on the involved parties, civil society and representatives of the autochthone groups and parliaments must be able, in order to play their role, to promote and enforce changes needed for sustainable changes. So we have to fight against climate changes, and parliamentary groups have started this work. The Parliamentary Network on Climate Change, Pan-American, already started, fostering this cooperation between the Parliament and agencies in charge of this climate changes. In Canada, they are tackled thinking of the fires uncontrolled in forests, or with all the floods and problems that did not happen before. In Canada, parliaments are acting so they can ensure sustainable development. They examine reports that aim to study all the efforts of the government to favor sustainable development. Permanent committees of the Senate and upper chamber are interested in this, in fighting these changes, and we can have an overview so the government can have bigger recommendations. The Senate also took an initiative to reduce its carbon print to zero. It's an example that shows that we can act locally and think globally. Initiatives can be taken inside our institutions to foster changes, and it's important to fight showing the example. And finally, Canada supports initiatives to help this energetic transition, light transition. They are help for the autochthon group and for environment, and their community are often in regions very sensitive to the impacts of climate change. Let's think of Arctic, that is inhabited by the autochthon people, and it's difficult to get warm there. And cooperating with the Global Bank, they foster the decrease of carbon for electricity in those countries. These are some examples of Canada's contribution and of our parliament to achieve the sustainable changes. And I'm very curious to know what other parliaments in G20 are doing. Thank you very much.
The next speaker from the Parliament of Angola.
Senhoras e senhores,
ladies and gentlemen, Africa is in a crossroads, facing challenges and opportunities. The quick growth of our population, the urbanization and consumption has given an environment that is challenging for economic development. This growth has to be approached as a strong emphasis in sustainability to avoid environmental degradation and climate change problems. We want to leave for future associations in the sustainable development with the 2030 agenda developed by the member states of the United Nations with 17 objectives. We will not be neutral. We have embraced the 2030 agenda with the National Development Plan that is in two fundamental pillars: valuing human capital with focus in education and health, and food security with focus in agriculture, modernization of infrastructures, of support to production, development of resilient ecosystems that can resist climate change, and sustainable management of hydric resources and forests. All of this demonstrates we are concerned with people, the planet, the environment. We're concerned with people, and we consider that society should firm it through solidarity with others. We are concerned with the planet because it's the home that embraces us. Our act today should not harm future generations. We are concerned with the environment because the needs of industrialization and economic development shouldn't have the high cost that has been translated into deforestation and the effects of droughts in the south of Angola. Your Excellencies, this is the moment to act and to act quickly. That's why we have adopted clean energy as a factor of development. With 76% of the energy already is renewable in our country. We adopted the agenda of digital transformation, but we still have a lot to do to include women and youth in the economy and to promote the generation of sustainable jobs. 70% of the population got access to basic health services due to the expansion and modernization of the health system. Also, the gradual expansion of sanitation and water. We are aware of the challenges that our country faces for macroeconomic stability and to pay foreign debts. But this shouldn't discourage us from the programs for social support, and the situation of youth unemployment is still very high. I would like to talk about the Quenda, which means walking in our national language, which is cash transfer to the families. And this is being implemented by the government and the World Bank and has helped 1.1 million families that are unfavored and in situation of vulnerability. Quality education, training, professional training for youth should be a priority. At the level of Parliament, we've approved laws, discussed policies that are more inclusive and adequate to the interests of the population, demanding that the government, there be an income increase for those programs connected to sustainable development. This is the second forum of Ombudsman for Civil Society in 2025. Last October, there were representatives of civil society in our parliament to discuss the legal framework and in the combat against HIV. Also, we had consultations with the electorate so we can hear widely the public in order to take better decisions. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to end saying that promoting sustainable development is not just an objective, but should be a strong social commitment and a path with no return for the well-being and the progress of our people, and to guarantee peace for our nations.
Now we hand the floor to Ms. Tully Axon, President of the Interparliamentary Union, IPU.
Mr. Chair and Mr. President, thanks for the opportunity. Honorable speakers of Parliament, as we prepare to discuss our role in promoting sustainable development, I am reminded of our collective duty as representatives of the people. Our role as parliamentarians goes beyond shaping policies. We are entrusted with the power to inspire, to enact, and to ensure accountability towards sustainable future for all. Sustainable development requires more than good intentions. It demands decisive, inclusive, and forward-thinking policies. This is where parliaments are essential. We are uniquely positioned to turn ambitious goals, such as sustainable development goals, into actionable laws and budgets that resonate with our community's needs. The Interparliamentary Union has been a committed partner in advancing parliamentary engagement with SDGs. Through initiatives such as the SDGs Self-Assessment Toolkit, we empower parliaments to evaluate their own effectiveness in implementing these critical goals. This toolkit serves as a practical resource to identify areas of improvement, fostering accountability, and encouraging proactive responses to our most pressing challenges. Additionally, our regional seminars create vital opportunities for collaboration and knowledge sharing across national boundaries, where parliamentarians can learn from one another's successes and innovate new approaches to sustainable development. To truly promote sustainable development, we must prioritize policies that protect our environment, reduce inequalities, and support resilient economies. This means championing renewable energy, advancing social protections, ensuring gender equality and equity, and fostering access to health and education for all. It is also essential that we support fair economic growth that doesn't compromise our planet's future or the dignity of any person in our community. Accountability, too, is our responsibility. As parliaments, we must hold governments to their commitments and ensure that every promise made translates into progress achieved. Our oversight is the backbone of trust, reminding our citizens that their future is safeguarded by transparent and responsive governance. Colleagues, let us renew our commitment today and act boldly and collaboratively. Let us strive for policies that honor both current and future generations. With the continued support and guidance of IPU, we are empowered to amplify our shared mission and build a fairer, greener, and more prosperous world for all. I thank you for listening.
Next speaker in our tribune, Mr. Alejandro Murat Rosa from the Upper House of Mexico.
Amigas y amigos, colegas.
Dear colleagues, I'm here once again in this summit, and I'm here to share with you some actions that the Mexican government has taken to accomplish the different goals of the 2030 agenda. These goals, with no doubt, they are desires that with our congresses we can convert into laws so that they can have the budgets, and in this way we can achieve the goals. We in the Senate of the Republic, we see in each commission in a transversal way this opportunity to push this agenda. But we also see from the executive branch, the President Claudia, she has mentioned that to accomplish this agenda we need to change the mindset to trickle-down economics, and we understand that if you do not make a bottom-up approach and do not include the society, the big changes that have been considered in this agenda 2030 will be in only good intentions. That's why we need to incorporate the subnational governments, the state governments and the municipality governments. But let me share with you that regardless of in different points of the agenda, we have advanced in a very important way. The first topic of the eradication of poverty, I can say that by means of social programs, of economic transfers, we have 80% of the Mexican population with support, and this has allowed the incrementation of at least 60% of the minimum wage, and reducing this way up until 1.5 million Mexicans in poverty in Mexico. I can also say that the goal of zero hunger, we have a specific program to support especially the agricultural producers, in which we can generate the inclusion by means of the agricultural sector to turn it into a agro industry and incrementing the participation of this sector to reach the goals of hunger zero. And in the education, quality education goal, we have generated some scholarships in the basic education for all the students in Mexico. And this way, their families, they have all the support to follow his kids, especially the girls and boys, so that they can go to school. And this has also, that will be also be unfolded in the intermediate and superior education as well. And to eradicate the hunger, we need to have a public policy that's very bold. And I can share with you that by the regional development, we have some good milestones. Mexico has had in the past 15 years between 8 to 6% in sustainable way, but we have also had some investments in the south of Mexico that generated some structural changes to so that the south of Mexico can also stop decreasing at least 2 or 3%, and it start growing in just as the north and the center of the country, and so that Mexico can reach a sustainable knowledge. This will also benefit the immigration movements that come from South and Central America, and we are sure that this can convert in a trilateral effort with USA and Canada to have a response to these movements of people migrating to North America. And at last, I'd like to share with you that we also have a vigorous agenda in the topic of water and energy that are fundamental topics, and we've done some specific changes in the legislation so that the people can have the priority to access in water, and also the companies. And then the President Claudia Sheinbaum has announced in a very important effort to have clean energy efforts as well in our community. So that's how we are going ahead with our 2030 agenda. Thank you so much.
Next representative to speak is the Vice President of the Upper House of India.
Chairperson and distinguished delegates, I'm glad to say that Parliament of India has always been at the forefront of addressing challenges faced by the people it represents. Over the decades, various dimensions of sustainable development goals have been extensively discussed in the Indian Parliament, leading to key policy initiatives. Our Parliament has passed many enabling legislations with direct bearing on sustainable development, including the Forest Conservation Act 1980, the Environment Protection Act 1986, the Biological Diversity Act 2002, the Right to Education Act 2009, the National Food Security Act 2013, the Recycling of Ships Act 2019, and Dam Safety Act 2021, etc. Distinguished delegates, India has a rich tradition of harmonious coexistence between humanity and nature. The Constitution of India mandates the state to protect and improve the environment while safeguarding the forest and wildlife of the country. A strong votary of action against climate crisis and sustainable development, India initiated a global mass movement known as Mission Life, that is Lifestyle for Environment, which was launched at the COP26 in 2021. The mission aims at making at least 80% of all villages and urban local bodies in India environmentally friendly by 2028. Some of you may recall that India had hosted a pre-summit parliamentary forum on life during the 9th P20 summit in New Delhi last year. Distinguished delegates, remarkable fact is, with more than 17% of the global population, India has contributed only about 4% of the global cumulative greenhouse gas emissions between 1850 and 2019. We have successfully reduced our emission intensity vis-a-vis our GDP by 33% between 2005 and 2019, achieving our initial nationally determined contributions target set for 2030, 11 years ahead of scheduled time. Further, India has added around 100 gigawatts of installed electric capacity between 2017 and 2023, of which around 80% is attributed to non-fossil fuel resources. India's contribution to global climate action is well demonstrated through our international initiatives such as establishment of the International Solar Alliance, coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure, creation of lead IT infrastructure for resilient island states, and Big Cat Alliance, to name a few. Voicing the concern of Global South, India strongly reiterates its position that developing countries have differentiated responsibilities for the mitigation of climate change. Given their lower per capita income, current per capita emissions, and minuscule contribution to historical emissions, we all have to bear in mind the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities that is known as CBDRRC, as different countries are at different stages of development. Honorable Chairperson, India's commitment to sustainable development is deeply rooted in our rich culture and history. The clarion call given by your Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Vishwas, Sabka Prayas, resonates with some core SDG principles of leaving no one behind. As the most populous country and one of the fastest growing economies, India's progress is pivotal to global success in achieving SDGs. We have been successful in lifting 250 million people out of poverty between 2013-14 and 2022-23. 96.35% households in India now have clean cooking fuel. 99.29% rural households have access to improved sources of drinking water. 100% households now have access to electricity. As people's representatives, let us continue to impress upon our respective governments. Thank you. I sincerely thank the National Congress of Brazil, the government of Brazil, for their warm hospitality in organizing this conference quite successfully. Thank you.
Next speaker, Lord Russell of Liverpool of the House of Lords of the UK.
Thank you very much. Dear fellow parliamentarians, I have to remind myself not to begin every speech with "my lords," which is what I usually do in the House of Lords. We need to remind ourselves that when agreed in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals had a number of core themes. Leaving no one behind was a core theme and a driving force, as was prioritizing the most vulnerable in our societies. These goals were universal and apply to every country across the globe. They were for everybody. They had targets as we sought to achieve peace and prosperity for people and the planet by 2030, only 6 short years away. But today, in 2024, we have a situation in which fewer than 20% of the SDGs are on target to be achieved by 2030. We are a very long way from where we wanted to be and where we hoped we would be. The development gains of recent decades are now under threat of reversal. Hard-won progress has stalled since 2015. 1 in 10 of the world's population, 712 million people, are living in extreme poverty, unable to access basic health, education, water, and sanitation, and are facing devastating and disproportionate climate impacts. Debt repayments are at their highest level for 25 years for low-income countries. 3.3 billion people live in countries that pay more in interest than on fundamental health and education. And it's estimated that climate change and biodiversity loss will increase food prices by 20% for billions of low-income people. This is a global emergency, but the SDGs can still provide the framework for us to deal with this rationally, both nationally and internationally. The new UK government has expressed its commitment to a world free from poverty and to preserving an inhabitable planet. And parliamentarians in the House of Lords will do what we do best, which is scrutinise the delivery of this commitment, which we will do in as much detail as we need. As we seek to tackle climate change, the United Kingdom is taking the bold, ambitious steps necessary to keep the ambition of 1.5 degrees Celsius alive, and we encourage others to come on board. We are committed to scaling up finance to accelerate the global energy transition with a new ambitious climate finance goal, emissions reduction targets in line with limiting warming to 1.5%, and further action is planned to build resilience to climate impacts and necessary international financial system reform. The new UK Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary both referred to the SDGs in their speeches at the United Nations in September, and this is to be welcomed. As we look to deliver against this vital challenge, it is apparent that a clear, effective, and modern development policy is urgent. We need to promote local leadership, to reconnect with our international partners, with the multilateral system, and to accelerate process on the SDGs. And as such, it is important that we as parliamentarians encourage sustained ambition from all G20 members on climate, clean energy, and the environment. The G20 is powerful in driving global ambition and can, if it wishes, take the lead in delivering new, reinvigorated financial models and goals to respond to the climate crisis. Beyond this, our role as parliamentarians is to ensure a continued focus. We can do this within our parliaments, as I said, by scrutinising the policies and programmes, and we will certainly do that in the House of Lords. But we also need to continue to contribute to dialogue and discussions such as that which we are holding today and tomorrow. Through these engagements, we make connections, we connect with each other at a personal and a social level. We try and learn why we have different points of view and to understand each other's points of view, and this can only strengthen and support our collective response. Thank you very much. Obrigado.
Next speaker to be in the tribune, Ms. Nelly Luthier, Vice President of the lower house of South Africa. Parlamentares, esse assunto reflete uma transição colaborativa para manter a segurança e o bem-estar das populações de uma forma sustentável, enquanto nós nos adaptamos à mudança climática. Uma frequência que tem aumentado nos desastres mundiais e um discurso de necessidade de ação. Os países do G20 têm sido expostos a desastres com
equivalent to 9% of their average annual investment in infrastructure. Although all populations are vulnerable, the level of risk often correlates with social factors. Therefore, it is crucial to ensure that our disaster risk reduction and humanitarian strategies are fully inclusive, particularly toward persons with disabilities. The 2023 Global Survey on Persons with Disabilities and Disasters by the UN Office for Risk or Disaster Risk Reduction revealed significant gaps in ensuring the participation of persons with disabilities in community DRR decision-making. South Africa commends the G20 commitments to accelerate progress on early warning and early action through strengthening national and local capacities, innovative financing tools, private sector investment, and knowledge sharing. We also appreciate their support to developing countries that reinforces these countries' existing capabilities and enhances the disaster and climate resilience of their infrastructure systems. However, it is vital for us to encourage our governments to establish robust mechanisms to monitor the full implementation of their commitments. It is untenable for the G20 to adopt annual declarations and commitments without a proper tracking and reporting framework when considering the impact these commitments can have on humanity. To foster accountability, G20 parliaments must share in this responsibility through overseeing their government's adherence to G20 commitments. In South Africa, disasters directly impact our economy. It increases the cost of doing business, undermines competitiveness, slows unemployment growth, and causes substantial damages to homes and critical infrastructure. The consequential strain on public finances has required the reallocation of funds from other essential services and increased borrowing, leading to higher debt levels and interest payments. High debt levels and debt service costs limit our capacity to invest in areas needed for building climate-resilient economies. To ensure that our communities and economy are resilient in the face of climate change, we are undertaking a range of interventions to adapt to climate change and mitigate its impact. This year, we passed the Climate Change Bill to enable our country to meet its emissions reduction commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement. Our government has embarked on the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program, attracting billions of rands in investment and adding much needed capacity to our national electricity grid. Our Just Energy Transition Investment Plan for the 5-year period 2023 to 27 sets out the scale of need and the investments required to achieve the decarbonisation commitments in our nationally determined contribution, which outlines the rate at which South Africa plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and represents South Africa's fair contribution to the goals of the Paris Agreement. Through our parliamentary committees, we will continue to hold our government departments accountable for the implementation of the plan to ensure that the country remains on track with reducing its greenhouse gas emissions. African countries are amongst the most vulnerable to the effects of a rapidly changing climate. They must adapt and build resilience, all while facing historically low levels of development and severely limited capacity. Therefore, it is prudent for parliaments of the North to urge their governments to act with urgency, expedite emissions reduction efforts, fulfill their financial and technological transfer commitments, and uphold previous pledges. This collaborative and persistent action is vital to ensure a more sustainable and secure future for all. I thank you.
Next speaker, Mr. Konstantin, Vice President of the Upper House of Russia.
Honorable President and dear colleagues, on behalf of the Russian Federation delegation, I would like to thank you for your warm welcome and a great organization of this fantastic conference. Parliaments play an important role in the formation of the global agenda, which is especially important in the current age of economical, political, and social turbulence. Solving issues related to climate change, the state of the environment, the risks of food and power security requires collective effort of nations and peoples, not only the governments, the people who are part of the parliament. Meanwhile, the fact that the implementation of the 2030 UN Agenda for Sustainable Development is stalling and the least developed countries suffer the most because of the unstable condition of global economy is a source of concern.
concern. Ensuring sustainable development is one of the Russians' top priorities. As President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, said in his video message to G20 summit in 2023, our country will continue making its contribution to the balanced achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Russia does not simply work towards each of the 17 goals defined in the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. Measures for achieving SDGs are integrated into our national project and other strategic programs and documents. Russia strives to participate in the global environmental process as actively as possible. Our country is one of the leading countries based on contribution to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and our power balance is one of the greenest in the world. Green gas, nuclear and hydropower generation in our country makes up for 85% of total power generation. Russia supports a balanced approach for addressing issues related to the transition of global economy of low-emission development models. At the same time, we believe it is important to combat the attempts of certain countries to use the environmental agenda to eliminate competitors from the market, especially when it comes to developing countries. The Federal Assembly traditionally includes sustainable development issues into its priorities and actively involves the expert community in discussions of topical issues. We have formed our councils for regional healthcare for disabled people, for regional social innovations, the work of which is aimed at developing recommendations to improve legislation in the corresponding areas. Russian parliamentarians actively work on regulating the transition towards green energy. In recent years, we have adopted several laws aimed at legal regulation of business activities to restrict emissions of greenhouse gases. We pay close attention to the development of low-carbon energy. Parliamentarians actively make necessary modifications to the legislation and control their implementation. The Russian side has repeatedly proclaimed its support of the idea of strengthening the role of parliaments in the implementation of the 2020 Agenda for Sustainable Development and once again confirms its commitment to this process today. We go on the premise that the participation of the legislative power is one of the key factors in this area. And of course, the topic of facilitating sustainable development has an important place in interparliamentary cooperation. And in the joint declaration of the 10th BRICS Parliamentary Forum held in St. Petersburg, the legislators expressed their intent to facilitate sustainable development of the organization's member state. Russian legislators actively promote the idea of sustainable development at various international events. In close cooperation, for example, the 34th Asia-Pacific Parliamentary Forum in Manila resulted in the adoption of a resolution, sustainable goals. We not long ago, at the 149th Inter-Parliamentary Union Assembly, we highlighted an unacceptability of politicizing the topic of sustainable development and also noted that illegal sanctions are a direct attack on all 17 development goals of the UN. And we would like to say that all the flow of goods into the capital and spread of use of modern technology in some sort of tool of geological domination. So all these sanctions are very, so some countries still think in the mindset of neo-colonialism, and they put our law making all the goods and modern technologies a kind of tool which is geopolitical domination. It makes turns into chaos all the political relations. So the sustainable development is the real tool that we have to consider of all the members, and Russia for sure is ready to participate in this participation at its full strength. Thank you very much for your attention.
The next speaker in the tribune, the Vice President of the United Arab Emirates, Ms. Tariq Al-Tair.
Your Excellencies, good afternoon. Boa tarde. It gives me a great pleasure to thank the friendly Republic of Brazil for the warm reception and hospitality we received, and to the National Congress of Brazil and the IPU for the outstanding preparation and organization of the summit. This occasion highlights the shared responsibilities we bear as parliamentarians in building a world where justice and sustainability are not mere ideals but lived realities. Our world today stands as profound crossroads, driven forward by remarkable technology advances and breakthroughs that reshape our lives, yet confronted by urgent environmental and resources challenges that threaten our collective future. It is as if we navigate stormy seas, where one hand reaching toward a promise of a brighter future and the other hand holding firm against the waves that threaten our shared survival. As parliamentarians, our role extends beyond the chambers of legislation. We are entrusted by our people for their collective hopes and tasked with ensuring that progress does not leave behind inequality, that justice knows no borders, and that opportunity is not privileged to some, but a universal right to all. Together, we need to ensure that our chase for innovation complements with our duty to protect and preserve the planet that sustains us. Considering this, the urgency of our mission becomes even clearer when we consider the hard environmental and climate change fact. Climate change alone is projected to cost the global economy $23 trillion by 2050. It lives unaddressed, affecting nations rich and poor alike. Rising temperatures, sea level increase, and extreme weather events are already forcing millions to migrate from their homes, with predictions suggesting up to 1.2 billion climate refugees by 2035, mainly from the south to the north. Meanwhile, our planet resources faces unprecedented strain, as the global population is expected to exceed 9 billion within the next 3 decades. If current consumption patterns continue, we would need nearly 2 Earths to sustain future generations. These figures are not just statistics, they are a call to action for each of us to legislate with foresight, responsibility, and commitment to safeguarding our shared future. In this spirit, the UAE, like many nations represented here, understands that sustainability is not a choice, it is an imperative. To this end, proudly hosted COP28 and building on many sustainability initiatives and practices achieved in 2023. President His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of UAE, has declared that the year of sustainability will continue into 2024, reinforcing UAE commitment to environmental protection and its pledge to support global sustainability efforts. Such commitments, UAE believes, demand a shared responsibility among all nations, since the consequences of environmental changes transcend borders and distinction, and since true environmental justice requires that we view our world through a unified lens. Accordingly, for sustainable planet, it is more urgent now than ever to national, regional, and international parliamentary institutions to emphasize that driving structural shift toward more investment choices in renewable energy sources constitutes a backbone for achieving a sustainable national development. Such systematic change can secure newer and more diverse economic investment and industrial opportunity, as it can curb and slow climate change's consequences, thereby providing a clean and safe environment for all people. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me, as we stand here united in purpose, to call upon you to turn our thoughts to the innocent civilians in Gaza and Lebanon, whose suffering rings far beyond borders, and whose thirst and hunger burden us all. As a global community, their hardships are not there alone, but a shared human tragedy that appeals to our collective conscience. And so, the world sustains an urgent need to peace, a peace that is more than an absence of conflicts of war, but principles that believe rooted to coexistence, tolerance, and compassion for one another. And it is our duty as parliamentarians to champion unity, resilience, and a commitment to a planet that provides equality for all. It is our duty as well to advocate for peace, to advocate dialogue as the only true path, resolve differences, and to foster a world where diversity is celebrated and where every individual can live in safety and dignity. Thank you.
Next speaker, member of the Chinese Parliament, Mr. Yang Zhenghu.
Distinguished President, delegates, I am the chairperson of the Social Development Affairs Committee of China's National People's Congress. It's my great pleasure to join this discussion on the role of parliaments in promoting sustainable development, which is a very important topic. The focus of this session is sustainable development. It could not be more timely to have such discussions. Under new circumstances and facing new challenges, parliaments of the G20, as representatives of public opinions, in addressing major economic and social issues around the world, must play a bigger and unique role. First, we should place development at the center of the international agenda. Development holds the key to resolving difficult issues and delivering a happy life to our people. We need to uphold the people-centered philosophy of development and jointly forge a united, equal, balanced, and inclusive global development partnership. We need to deepen energy and food cooperation, jointly build a secure, stable, smooth, efficient, open, inclusive, and mutually beneficial global industrial and supply chain system, and oppose exclusive small circles and abuse of unilateral economic sanctions. The Global Development Initiative proposed by President Xi Jinping has been endorsed by over 100 countries and international organizations. China stands ready to work with all parties to add more substance to this initiative and give a strong boost to the implementation of the UN 2030 agenda. Second, we should adopt a green and low-carbon approach and promote harmony between man and nature. Man and nature lives in the same community of life. We need to comply with the objectives, principles, and the institutional framework laid out in the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, adhere to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, proactively address climate change, and accelerate green and low-carbon transition. The international community needs to take seriously developing countries' special difficulties and concerns. Developed countries need to effectively fulfill their own international responsibility and provide more financial and technological support for developing countries to help them better respond to climate change. Third, we should uphold true multilateralism and improve the global governance system. The world today is moving toward greater multipolarity and economic globalization, and our societies are becoming increasingly digitized and culturally diversified. We need to follow the vision of a community with a shared future for mankind, practice a global governance philosophy of extensive consultation and joint contribution for shared benefit, and uphold the common values of humanity, namely peace, development, fairness, justice, democracy, and freedom. It's important to safeguard the international system with the UN at its core, the international order underpinned by international law, and the WTO-centered multilateral trade regime. Colleagues, China has always held high the banner of peace, development, cooperation, and mutual benefit, followed the path of peaceful development, and made active efforts in building a community with a shared future for mankind. In the past 10 years, China contributed to about 30% of the world economic growth on average, becoming the largest growth engine worldwide. Colleagues, China's National People's Congress has been committed to a people-centered approach and has always prioritized people's concerns in our legislative work. We have introduced the Civil Code of China, introduced a series of laws to advance social fairness, harmony, and sustainable development. Lawful protection of environment is a top priority of our legislation and oversight. We have designated a National Ecology Day through legislation and carried out inspection on the enforcement of relevant laws and decisions, making contribution to China's low-carbon development. Colleagues, in this July, the third plenary session of the 20th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China was held, and systematic deployments have been made on further deepening reform comprehensively to advance Chinese modernization. China will continue to provide new opportunities to the world through its own development. China's NPC is ready to strengthen exchanges and cooperation with legislatures of all countries to jointly contribute to world prosperity and development. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite the next and the last one speaker, Ms. Tamina Pereira, member of the Parliament of Mozambique. Allow me to, on behalf of the Assembly of the Republic and the Parliamentaries of Mozambique, salute Your Excellency, Mr. Arthur Lira, and the representatives of G20 countries. This conference occurs in a peculiar political context in the world, has the challenges of climate change and the increase of inequalities of the countries in the South, global South and North South. This topic is very current, very pertinent, and we invite us to, in a joint reflection, in the search for sustainable solutions for global problems. I will focus my intervention in the role of the parliaments in promotion of sustainable development, sharing the experience of Mozambique in sustainable development, ecological transition that is fair and inclusive, and the mitigation of climate change impacts. Mozambique, given to the geographic localization, has been hit by cyclones and the flooding from the dams that were destroyed. These occurrences have conditioned the performance of the economy and the fulfillment of the goals of our government program. The agricultural sector has been jeopardized, especially the rural families who dedicate to agriculture as their income source, bringing food insecurity. The National Assembly approved the program to contemplate the priorities to advocate for the environment according to the 2030 agenda in the United Nations. In the institutional level, we have the commitment to deal with the environmental issues and an Institute of National Management of Disasters to respond to emergencies in case of natural disasters. In the level of governance, we have instituted public policies to prevent and mitigate the impacts of climate change, contemplating the creation of resilient infrastructures, regional cooperation actions. As an example, the installation of the Humanitarian Operation Center and humanitarian events in the capital, Nampula, to respond to the catastrophes in our state, in our country. We also have a meteorological center with the capacity to foresee and monitor the weather in a way to mitigate the impact of extreme meteorological events. Beyond the government, non-governmental organizations deal with environmental issues, providing advocacy and awareness through different communication actions, doing the recycling of plastic and glass in the beaches. These actions have contributed to the promotion of the environmental development, increasingly fair and inclusive in Mozambique. The Mozambican Parliament has improved the legislation for the protection of the environment, highlighting the approval of the environmental law, the law for protection, conservation, and sustainable use of biological diversity, which culminated in the approval of normative acts to protect our communities against floods and the management of plastic and the assessment of the environmental impact of the energy transitions. We also have legal instruments resulting from conventions signed with international organisms. We could implement local plans for adaptation and mitigation to climate change, in the social protection for food security. The parliamentary, they have circles of discussions to verify on-site the application of the laws of the Republic and promote awareness actions with the highlight of the riparian areas to combat erosion and to defend. In the ecological transition, we have promoted the access to clean energy with photovoltaic energy, providing the production of clean energy. Mozambique has one of the biggest reserves of liquefied gas of the world, and we have the investment in a fair and clean energy production, having the part of the income of liquid gas to invest in agriculture. We have the plea for the industrialized countries to fulfill their commitments in the mitigation and adaptation to climate change, including the financing of the climate fund, helping the mitigation of the El Niño effect that is isolating sub-Saharan Africa, providing vulnerability and food insecurity. We would like this conference to become a platform for dialogue and commitments for the parliaments to be responsible for the sustainable development and to promote fair ecological transition for the well-being of our people and the defense of our common house, the planet Earth. Thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we close the session, I would like to thank those authorities present and to all who shared their perspectives on the role of parliaments in sustainable development as facing significant obstacles like humanity is having now. So I'd like to reiterate to our guests that the President of the Senate and myself would have great satisfaction in meeting you once more in the official dinner that will happen at 8 p.m. in the Itamaraty Palace. Tomorrow, 9:30, we will have the third session, the third working session of the 10th G20 with the theme, the parliaments in building a global governance adapted to the challenges of the 21st century. I declare closed the session.